Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is 2023, and it is time for yet another fantastic episode of the MLB Guardcast. I am Mike Vorhies. I have the closer, the statistician extraordinaire, Bryan Shaw, with me as well. Bryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Mike. It's been a little while. There's been some additions. Some exciting additions to the Cleveland Guardians. I had tweeted out on our Twitter account kind of just how different this team was compared to basically at this point last year, and how many faces and people that we had penciled in certain positions no longer in those positions and no longer even on the team. So a lot of changes in the last.
I saw that and I had to chuckle because it's like, wow, what a difference a year makes. I mean, what a run the Guardians had, obviously, into the divisional round of the playoffs, only to get knocked out by the hated New York Yankees, but who then gets bounced by the eventual World Series winner, the Houston Trash Pandas, or whatever we're calling them these days. But man, oh man. Well, Bryan, I do have a question. Are you still looking to spruce up your company's logo or website? Because if you are, I've got great news. If you're also looking for help when it comes to digital arts and marketing, we've got the hookup. Look no further than NovaDigitalArts. You can check out their work at NovaDigitalArts at iCloud.com. Tell them that the MLB Guardcast sent you. NovaDigitalArts. They are located in Green, Ohio. You can give Derek a call at 234-716-1687. And they've been creating magic since 2007.
Mike, today's a big day. Big day for the Guardcast.
Big day.
A big day for Guardians fans, because we have a special guest with us today that's going to help us recap the exciting season that it was for the Cleveland Guardians. They're going to help us recap the offseason and the exciting additions for the Cleveland Guardians, and maybe help us sort out through some of the roster and what we can expect to come moving forward with the Cleveland Guardians.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for our very special guest. He is one half of, in my opinion, the greatest on-air broadcast team of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with distinct pleasure I introduce Rosie, Jim Rosenhaus. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Man, Mike, you went way overboard on that one. I'm doing great, but thank you. Much appreciated.
Not a problem.
Doing well.
I've listened to you guys for years, so I'm happy to use that. I think with full disclosure, 100% honesty, I would say that whether you were here or not. So,
Jim, it's great to have you. We're really thrilled. If you would, just in case there's some of our listeners that are more TV watchers than radio listeners, give us a little bit of your background, and do you have any other duties with the team?
Duties with the team currently would be, I manage the radio network, which we have 27 stations, different stations throughout Ohio, and actually ranging over into Pennsylvania and New York State. We have a station in Jamestown, New York. So during the off season, I try and visit them and take care of anything we need to do before the season starts. And then just from the engineering standpoint, making sure our equipment's all set to go for the season, and then just try and keep tabs on everything going on in baseball so that we're ready to go in spring training.
Awesome. I have to say, and you kind of touched on it at Guards Fest, which I attended, that not a lot of people expected this team to be as good as they were. I mean, Mike and we expected the team to have a winning record, but honestly, we kind of expected the Twins or the White Sox to be a little bit better and maybe win the division. Just talk about what it was like to go through this season and the excitement that this team had and what it was like to be a part of that.
It was one of the most enjoyable seasons since I've been here. And that goes back to 2007, which was a really good year to get it started. But I think anytime, and I'm always hesitant to say there's low expectations. I think that's from the media side, fan side, I'm going to guess a lot of fans had pretty low expectations this time a year ago, just because of not much movement at all before the lockout, and then the lockout. And when that ended, they signed a backup catcher and Luke Maley, and that was about it. And they signed your brother, Bryan Shaw, too. But outside of that, they didn't do a whole lot. And so often when you hear management say, we're going to go young and find out about people, it's like, oh, where's winning fit with all that? But just you find out that from Terry Francona's perspective and his coaching staff and the front office, all right, they're going to go young. They're going to find out about people. But that's the way they're going to try and win a year ago, because that's what they needed to do. But winning still was front and center. They just were going to have to do it in a different manner, and in a manner that not many major league teams try to do, and that's being the youngest team in baseball. So it all worked out, and I think it made for one of the most unlikely, exciting, enjoyable seasons that they've had here in a long time.
Yeah, it was definitely a blast. I mean, I know like Mike and I were talking about kind of before this, all the changes at the beginning of the season. I mean, they found out about some guys really quick. Bobby Bradley, Bradley Zimmer, Oscar Mercado, Yu Chang. Those guys were all like in the starting lineup on opening day. And then it wasn't soon after that they were off the team.
You know, it's amazing because we'll all be guilty of it again in about a month. Everyone is so keyed up about what is that opening day roster going to be? And especially like the back end of it, you know, the people get all worried about who the last infielder or fourth outfielder is going to be. And in a grand scheme of things, you know, it's who you are as a team after the All-Star break that, you know, seems to really matter, because you do spend some early season games trying to find out about certain players, and they did that and gave others a chance, and some of them took it and ran with it, and others, you know, it was interesting because the names you mentioned, I think at certain points in time, there was a thought that they would be real key contributors to some good teams. Bradley Zimmer for sure. I mean, back in 17-18 looked like he was really coming on. Bobby Bradley, I think there was, you know, the year before he was kind of caught in the roster shuffle of not being on the roster and having options left, and it killed him. And then last year he had no options left, and it seemed to maybe take some of that edge away for him because he just never got it going again. So you just never know coming out of spring training what you really have. And that's what makes the season so interesting.
I know, Jim, what Bryan and I all season long, we talked about how just exciting and how young and fun this team was. Like, is there a point in the season where you were watching this team and you're like, this team's going places?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of people point to that game in May in Chicago when Josh Naylor hit the game-tying grand slam, and then another home run in extra innings to win it. Just as maybe a turning point of feeling that they're never out of a game. But in terms of like the young talent, I'm going to be honest with you, like really that first road trip of the season, you may remember the first two games, they barely, I think they scored one run in the first two games, and you thought, oh boy, it's going to be a long year. But then they went wild the last 2 days in Kansas City and beat up on the Reds before they came home. And you thought, you know, maybe there's something here. And some of it was Stephen Kwan and how well he started the season. Some of it was Jose Ramirez, the fact that he had signed a long-term contract extension. And that seemed to really lift the spirits of the team compared to the tail end of spring training when it looked like he might be traded because they weren't able to work out a deal yet. And so, you know, I think pretty early on you saw some great signs, but you never really know. And they were still not a first place club until well after the All-Star break. So there were some really good signs, but you know, until your team is really in contention, I think in late July and August, it's hard to really predict what's going to happen.
I think for me, it was Father's Day weekend. They won the Dodgers series.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, all right, you know what? I think these guys can compete. And it's funny you mentioned that offensive explosion, because I had texted Mike and I was like a day off of when they were going to go nuts. I said, oh yeah, they're going to score like 15 runs in one of these upcoming games. And sure enough, they did. We were talking a little bit about kind of last season and they just only signed kind of Luke Maile and there wasn't a lot of excitement. A little bit different this time around for the offseason. It looks like that they were aggressive in a couple of guys that they really wanted to get. Got Josh Bell. I love that move. I think he's a perfect fit for this team and kind of fills a definite need that maybe they were hoping Franmil Reyes was going to fill last year and didn't end up doing. And then Austin Hedges goes to Pittsburgh and they pick up Mike Zunino, who's coming off of that injury, but he had that all-star season just the season prior.
They always talk about just trying to find some good talent, but they really filled needs, I think, for sure behind the plate, because they lost both catchers already in the offseason. So they needed a veteran catcher to hopefully come in and catch a bunch. I'm not sure health-wise how well Mike Zunino will hold up and how careful they need to be with him. And then who is the other catcher? Is it Bo Naylor in that situation? Or does he still need development time at Columbus? That's going to be I think one of the key stories to watch in spring training. But they filled a need that they had to get a decent veteran catcher in here, and they certainly did that with Mike Zunino. And I'm with you. I love the Josh Bell signing. If he can be the Josh Bell that he's been for the most part, the past half dozen years or so, I think they'll be real happy with what they have.
I saw him at Guards
I think
Fest.
I speak for most.
That's a big man, isn't he?
Yeah. Next to that Silver Slugger award, I joked the Browns need another defensive end. I didn't know if he was going to be like a Bo Jackson two-way sport guy and maybe play some NFL ball too.
Well, I'll be honest. When the news broke that Josh Bell had signed with the Guardians, I originally thought it was a joke. I didn't think it was serious at all, and I think it was Bryan that texted me, and he's like, "Holy crap, Josh Bell's a Guardian," and I'm like, this has to be a dream. I was not expecting it. We heard it, when free agency started, that Cleveland was linked to Josh Bell, and I'm like, he'll end up going somewhere else. But to get that kind of a bat in the lineup, Jim, obviously we'll most likely see him play a lot of first base, but what does having a bat like that do for some of these young guys, and especially for somebody like Jose, who needs a little bit more protection in that lineup?
Well, and I think they addressed a need. As fun as it was to see how the offense worked last year with the contact approach and not striking out, everything against the norms of today's baseball with the three true outcomes, the one thing missing was power. I mean, they were near the bottom of Major League Baseball in terms of home runs. And it's nice to try and put the ball in play and string together some hits, but you need a lot of them to score some runs. And sometimes that's hard. So to be able to bring in a power bat is huge. To have it be a switch hitter is big. I think Tito loves that. It just gives him more flexibility. And I think the hope is too, you mentioned protecting Jose Ramirez, but it might be some protection too for Oscar Gonzalez. And also, it allows them to be a little more careful with Josh Naylor. I think his leg will be better this year than it was last year, but I think they still want to be careful with him and not overdo it at first base if they can help it. So I think it'll be a real nice addition to the ball club in a lot of ways, not only his numbers, but what he may mean to others.
Rosie, you talked about kind of over analyzing the roster and things. And of course, that's what we do on our podcast. And we talk about statistics and on social media and stuff like that. And I have to say, for like the last 2 years, Mike and I have been talking about this glutton of middle infielders that this team has, and that, there's this 40-man roster crunch, and they're going to have to trade some of these guys, and maybe they'll trade some and get another starter or another outfielder. And here we are, and they've never moved anybody. They did kind of move Owen Miller and Ernie Clement, but we have Brian Rocchio and Gabriel Arias and Tyler Freeman and Jose Tena, and I think I'm missing another one. And there's just a lot of guys at short and second base. And yes, Ahmed Rosario is going to be a free agent next year, but it still seems like that they've got this log jam of good players at shortstop and second base and not a lot of places to play them. What do you think is going to happen in that situation?
Well, I wonder, we're still a month out from spring training and 2 months from the season plus. And I have nothing concrete to base this on, because they sure don't call me up and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. But I feel like maybe there's something else that's going to happen. I don't know what it would be, but they have the depth in that area to do it. And I just feel like, last year they had some 40-man issues where they were struggling to protect everybody. And that's why one of the reasons they had to go so young. And you just wonder if they need to go that route to alleviate some of that, that kind of glut on the 40-man. But I just, it's hard because they believe in some of these young kids so much, these young middle infielders, the names you mentioned. So, but I just wonder if they're not done yet in terms of configuring the roster. And I might be surprised if there's not some sort of move between now and the start of the season.
All
so
right,
that
Mike.
means there probably won't be.
Yeah, you heard it here first. The
Yeah.
Guardians are trading Gabriel Arias for whoever. I'm kidding, obviously, but I wondered myself, since they haven't done that yet, if it's going to be one of those situations, kind of like how the outfield played out last year, giving Mercado that chance, giving Zimmer that chance, seeing kind of who rises to the top, maybe at the AAA level, and then at the deadline, they see, okay, where do we need to strengthen this team, and then make the move then, because I guess barring injury, the crunch is already crunched. They've set their 40-man and they've protected the guys that they wanted to protect, and the Rule 5 draft has happened. So I guess I guess it's a wait and see, but it's interesting that you think that that they're not done yet. It would be really exciting, I think, going into the season if they could pull off another deal.
May very well be, but I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, they signed 2 free agents, which I thought the moves in the offseason would be trades. And there haven't been yet, but I know they've been trying, and certain stuff just hasn't matched up, and maybe an indication of what they're thinking. It sounded like Oakland was asking for a big time return for Sean Murphy, and Cleveland just wasn't comfortable giving up what was asked. We don't know what was asked, but I think it just shows that, they don't just want to hang on to their prospects because they're prospects and they don't want to lose them and see them play somewhere else. But they do believe that they're not sure who it is yet, I don't think, but I think they have a pretty heavy belief in what these kids can do at some point down the road. And the one thing, realistically to keep an eye on, you mentioned Ahmed Rosario. If the season does not go as they hope, then what happens around the trade deadline with him? Now, if this is a winning ball club, he is such a huge part of that. What he does in the clubhouse is enormous. He's a veteran, even though he does it not age-wise, but experience-wise. And on this club, he's a veteran and a savvy one and a very well-respected one for what he means in the clubhouse and how he plays the game. So they want to keep him as long as they can. But if things don't go well this season, then maybe you might see some sort of movement there.
Well, we know that Bryan loves Ahmed Rosario. I was very hard on him to start the season. I figured with that log jam of middle infielders that he would be the odd man out, considering they didn't know if they were going to play him at short or in the outfield or what have you. And he comes and has an amazing season. He's got Jose Ramirez in his corner saying, pay this man. He needs it. And we want him on this team. And as the season grew, like, I really started to enjoy watching him play. And I can't imagine our infield without him right now, but I agree with you 100%. I think it all will depend on injuries, other team needs down the stretch. If another team has a catastrophic injury and they need a middle infielder, they know they can call Cleveland because we have several. And maybe we could play let's make a deal and come up with something nice.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The whole thing. And it does seem like of all the spots, different positions, whether it's pitching, outfield, middle infield, catching. For Cleveland, it's middle infielders. So we'll see what happens. There's a ton of them. We'll see if they hang around for a little while longer.
Now, Rosie, were you surprised that we didn't add a starting pitcher or any bullpen arms so far?
I think they're trying, and I think in past years, you've seen a kind of a flurry of activity just as camps are opening. For instance, Bryan's brother was signed just, right as camp was open. So I think
they're bringing him back again this year, right? Like he'll get the call like the day before spring training.
Until the season starts without him, I'm figuring he's on the team somehow.
That's Tito's favorite reliever. He can't not be here. I mean, it's his favorite guy. We can't go a season without Bryan Shaw. There's no way.
You wouldn't think. But I think there's still time. That it's been kind of quiet throughout baseball the last couple of weeks or so. So we'll see. I think it would be the minor league deals that these guys would come in on, and then hopefully you catch a flyer. That the Cleveland has been excellent in that area, signing someone to a minor league deal. Last year's example 1A was Angel De Los Santos, came in on a minor league deal and proved to be a real key out of the pen. And it seems like each year they get one or two of those. A little bit tougher with starting pitching, but we'll see. I just don't think they're done yet adding to the roster before spring training.
If they don't add a starter, I think I've got that guy who they did add on that minor league deal. I think Tuki Tucson is going to be that guy, that minor league deal. He's got that starting experience, and he just seems like one of those guys that his potential hasn't been quite unlocked, and then he's going to get into our system. And one of our guys like Shane Bieber or Aaron Cervalli is going to help him develop an extra pitch, and then all of a sudden, we're 6-7 deep at starter or something like that. I just have a feeling about him, just kind of I think he was with the Braves, based on the way like Braves fans were talking about him. So I'm wondering if he's that guy. But admittedly, when I made my wish list going into this season, back end starting pitching, I would have liked to have seen them kind of, get a little bit deeper, because you saw a lot of injuries with Aaron and then what happened in the playoffs. And then admittedly, I'm kind of over Zach Plesac and his shenanigans and, breaking fingers and hands, aggressively ripping shirts off or punching mounds and things like that. So I would have liked to have seen them get another starter. So, we'll have to see, kind of like what you said, what happens going into spring training and what happens here.
I think one of the challenges they have, if you're on the other side of it, pitchers want to go where they think there's opportunity, and you have a pretty good starting five already, and then there's a pipeline coming, and it's coming in a hurry. So if you're a veteran pitcher in on a minor league deal, you're probably thinking, I might not get an opportunity here. So that's the challenge for Cleveland. How do they sell this as a really not only good for them in terms of insurance, but how is it good for the pitcher? And we'll see. I mean, at some point, there's going to be certain guys who don't have jobs, and they're going to need jobs. So they're going to be in camp.
Interesting you say that. I've been thinking about another outfielder, actually, like kind of a guy that would need jobs, because the Guardians weren't great against lefties last year, and kind of Robbie Grossman's on my radar to kind of help supplement that outfield, because he just crushed lefties last year, kind of like in that Jordan Luplow mold of platooning. And then you had mentioned Josh Naylor and wanting to protect him, and I know Tito had mentioned, like, when they did sign Josh, they told Josh Bell, they told Josh Naylor, hey, you're going to play a little more outfield this year. But I'm sure that's going to be all dependent on how his leg is doing and things like that.
I would think, yeah. Again, I think, outfielders the same way. I mean, there's some pretty good young outfielders still on their way. George Valera, I know, is knocking on the door. They're really high on him. Will Brennan's in the picture now after what he did at the tail end of last season. So again, that's the key. Like, how do you sell an opportunity when, at least from outside appearances, it might not look like there's much there? But they will get some veterans in camp. There's no question about that on minor league deals.
My question is, how soon until we see George Valera? I've watched him at single A, double A, triple A. He looks the part. He looks like everything we have ever dreamed about for an outfielder. Rosie, when do you think it could be this year? Do you think we may have to wait a year?
It's so hard to say. The components to a call up are, you need to perform well and at least give appearances that you're ready to play up here, but then you also need an opportunity. And as it stands today, it's not there for him yet, but that could change. I'm not sure, what that timetable is, but he's knocking on the door, and who knows, maybe he's this year's Stephen Kwan. That's obviously a tall order for anybody, but I know the organization is extremely high on him and excited to see where he is at this point.
So not only is Cleveland middle infield university, we are also the outfield university as well. We seem to have a lot of talent coming, and obviously you can't play them all. So I think we could be seeing some roster moves before too long, I would think. I mean, it just would make more sense that way.
I mean, not necessarily. The guys are under contract. They're in your minor league system, so you might as well let them play and see what happens. I don't think they're not in a hurry to move guys.
Right.
They like what they have. So, we look at it as, there's a lot of guys and there's not enough spots, but as you know, this game changes seemingly daily in terms of what you need. So, they're happy to have that depth in their minor league system.
So, Bryan, what he's saying without saying it is that there's a chance you could still get Bryan Reynolds.
You on the Bryan Reynolds train, are you?
He's just a great talent. And, I know we have George Valera and a glutton of guys, but like, he's just so good. And if you've got all these pieces, and you've got this logjam of players, he would make a really, really nice addition to this team. I just really like his game. So there was always just kind of like a big hope, a long shot wish list to bring him aboard. But I understand that they like who they have in their system.
It's amazing he's still in Pittsburgh, isn't it? Because everybody seems to want him.
I wonder if the asking price is too high.
Oh, guaranteed.
Yeah, and because they know what a talent he is. I mean, obviously, if the Yankees haven't got him, right, and the Marlins haven't got him, those are the teams that he was linked to the most. And if those two can't pull off a trade, they're wanting the farm to get him. And maybe for Cleveland, that's just not in the cards. We don't want to give up a lot of talent, because then who moves out of the outfield to make room for Bryan Reynolds?
Yeah, that's all good points.
Well, before we send you off here, Rosie, one more question. What's your expectation?
Just one more?
Just
How long
one
is the show?
Well, I got one too.
All right, Mike's got one more from each of us. My question is, Mike, you go first, because mine's kind of a nice wrap-up question.
So mine would be, Jim, you've been doing a lot of games now for, the Indians, the Guardians. What is one memory that stands out that you were so excited to be in the booth and be a part of?
Easily the Rajai Davis home run in the 16 World Series, for sure. Although the two walk-offs in the home playoff games this year were pretty darn good too. Gonzo's game-breaking home run against Tampa Bay, and then his walk-off single against the Yankees. Just two memorable moments. But Rajay's, man, I mean, Game 7 World Series, that's as good as it gets. And I know the rest of the night didn't turn out the best if you're a Cleveland fan, but that moment was unbelievable. And just to peel back the curtain, he hits the home run, and post game, we're going down to the clubhouse, and it's, you got to wear your old clothes because it's a mess down there after they win the World Series, right? So I had gone to the back of the booth while Tom was still doing the inning to get ready to go downstairs, and then sat back down, and unfortunately it never transpired where they came out on top. But just the unlikeliness of it, he wasn't a home run hitter, and he's facing Aroldis Chapman, and the whole situation. Game 7, one of these teams is going to break a long losing streak or non-World Series winning streak. So I think that one, it'll be hard pressed to ever match that unless they win a World Series at home.
Well, and he was comically choked up on the bat. I mean,
Right.
He basically had his hands in the middle of the bat, and then it looked like he just kind of stuck the bat out there, and then it went out of the park. It was basically Aroldis hit a home run off of himself almost.
Mm-hmm.
So just a couple minutes left here, Rosie. I want to know, and I know you work for the team, so you may not want to put yourself out there, but what's your prediction for this coming year? Or maybe sell some people that are still kind of on the fence about how good this team could be and how exciting this team could be.
Well, I hate doing predictions because, let's face it, last year nobody would have predicted this team would do what it did. And there'll be some teams again in that spot, and it might not be Cleveland, but I think going into this year, they've had some seasons in the last decade where they were, there was a lot of optimism and deserved excitement about the team, and it panned out. Those years 16, 17, when they won division titles. I don't know that they're quite to that yet, but who knows? Maybe they are based on last season. I think they'll be very good. You can't predict injuries with so many young players. Some of them are not going to have the seasons that they had a year ago. They're going to go through some struggles, but that's where you hope that someone else steps up and has those types of years. As long as Tito's the manager, they always have a great chance to win the division. They really do. I think the White Sox will be better because they've made some key changes. I think the Twins will be better. They've made some nice additions in the offseason. And one of these years, Kansas City and Detroit will no longer be rebuilding, and they'll have a breakthrough. So you just don't. That's why it's so hard. And I know you're looking for an answer, but I can't.
I get it.
It's not because I work for the team. If I was, and it's just silly to me. Sure. It's silly to make predictions before season. Obviously, there's certain teams that are going to be really good.
I get it.
Dodgers,
I did
Mets,
fib though. I do have one more quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If there is a suspect on the team, who stole Tito's scooter?
Exactly. We all want to know. What do you know? What do you know, Rosie?
Who do you have the best odds on being that prankster that stole Tito's scooter?
Oh, if they did it, oh, God bless them, man. Because I mean, that's, there's certain things you don't steal, and you don't steal Tito's scooter. But if Hedges was still here, he'd be, and maybe he still is the prime suspect. He's only over in Pittsburgh. That's who I would, like, if he was still here, I'd point to him in a heartbeat. Or Brian Shaw. Supposedly he hasn't signed yet, but maybe he was floating around this past weekend. I don't know. Those would be my two, and I know they're not on the roster right now, but those would be my two suspects.
That's great.
That is so awesome. I love it.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure. Really, really appreciate your time. Really, really appreciate your perspective and you coming on to talk to us. We're both big fans. We listen and watch every single game, and we both grew up here and been following this team for a long time. So it's just a real pleasure to get to talk to you.
Well, nice to meet you both, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely.
We're looking forward to an amazing season. Listen to Rosie and Tom Hamilton this season, guys. When you're not listening to us, tune into them. Listen for all of your Guardians action. It's going to be another fantastic year. Shaw and I will be back soon as we get you set, ready to go. Spring training just around the corner.
Incredible stuff from Jim Rosenhaus, Mike. Great to have him on. Really fortunate that he was willing to take the time to come talk to us today. But we have much more coming this season. Once spring training gets rolling and we start to see maybe who's going to make the team, if there's any additional moves, we're going to be here for you. We're going to have the latest, and then we'll be talking about the team every 2 weeks once the season gets started. Where can they find you on social media, Mike?
On social media, I am on Facebook and Twitter at Mike Vorhies. Mr. Shaw, where can they find you and us?
I'm Bryan Shaw on Facebook, at WXSHAW on Twitter. You can find us Guardcast MLB on Twitter. We're the MLB Guardcast on Facebook. We're also on YouTube if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can listen to us on Spotify and Apple. We're in all the places, but it's been great to talk to you all today. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Jim Rosenhaus. Again, great thanks to him. It was really, really appreciated that he was willing to take the time to speak with us.
Absolutely. A dream come true. Now can we get Tom? Can we get Hamilton? Can we? I don't know.
That you're the one with the connections. If you can pull that off,
we'll best I can. We'll see what we can do. Until next time, everybody.